We are live now.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome members of the Standards Committee, officers and members of the public viewing on YouTube to this virtual meeting of the Standards Committee. I'm Dr. Axel Palmer, Chair of the committee. I'm now going to call out the names of the other participants to this meeting to introduce themselves individually. Councillor Jess David.
Hi there. I'm Jess David, Councillor for Moorlands Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Sally Davis.
Yes, I'm present, Councillor for Clutton Farnborough Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan Hounsell.
Present, Councillor for Salford Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Michelle O'Doherty.
Hello, I'm Councillor for Newbridge Ward.
Thank you. Councillor June Player.
Yes, present, Councillor for Westmoreland Ward.
Parish Councillor Tony Crouch is due to be here, but I can't see him on screen. So, Councillor Clive Fricker.
Present, Chairman. Councillor, Keynsham Town Council.
Councillor Kathy Thomas.
Yes, I'm present and I represent ALCA.
Thank you. And independent members, Dr. Cyril Davis.
Yes, present and correct.
And Deborah Russell.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And finally, of the representatives, the independent person, Tony Drew.
Hello, yes, Tony Drew, independent person.
Also present are Maria Lucas, monitoring officer.
Hello.
And Jack Latkovich, the senior democratic services officer.
Hello.
Thank you. This meeting is being held under the Local Authorities and Police and Crime Panels, bracket coronavirus, close bracket, open bracket, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, close bracket, open bracket, England and Wales, close bracket, regulations 2020. The Council has agreed a protocol to cover virtual meetings, and this meeting will operate in line with that protocol. The meeting has the same status and validity as a meeting held in the Guildhall. May I remind members, officers and speakers to keep background noise to a minimum, to only speak one person at a time, and not to speak over others. Please mute your microphones when not speaking, and then unmute when I invite you to speak. Please indicate if you wish to speak by using the chat facility on Zoom by typing MIS, that's may I speak, and I will call you to speak in turn. If a member has to leave the meeting, then please draw my attention to this by using the chat facility. If you subsequently return to the meeting, then please also draw my attention to this in the same way. Members should also inform me if they lose connection and miss any part of the meeting, as this may result in them not being able to vote, if a vote is required, on any item they did not hear in full. If the committee is required to take a vote, I will read out each member's name in alphabetical order. Each member should then clearly state if they are for or against the motion. This will enable the Senior Democratic Services Officer to accurately record the vote and will also ensure that decision taking is clear. So, colleagues, item number 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I haven't been advised of any, and I'm looking at the other colleagues and they haven't been advised of any either, I can see.
No, Chairman, no, there's no apologies apart from Councillor Tony Crouch, who is absent from this meeting.
Item number 3 is declarations of interest in any items on this agenda. And seeing shaking of head and nobody saying yes, let's move on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is urgent business agreed by the chair. I have agreed to bring forward the Local Government Ethical Standards Best Practice paper for consideration at this point. And I'd like to invite the monitoring officer, Maria Lucas, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. You should all have a copy of the list of best practice in front of you. The reason I brought it to the Standards Committee as an urgent item is that I've been informed that the Cabinet Office is going to be contacting me to ask for me to feed back the progress of the Council against the recommendations. And I'm very pleased to remind the Standards Committee that we did previously consider this. This is the Committee on Standards in Public Life list of best practice. We considered it at the Standards Committee meeting on the 21st of March 2019, and again on the Standards Committee meeting on the 4th of July 2019. So we have actually comprehensively considered it, and I just thought it would be worthwhile us just discussing what we said then, and so that that would form the basis of my response to the Cabinet Office. So if we just go through the best practice list, there are 15 of them. The first one is about prohibitions for bullying and harassment in codes of conduct. And hopefully the committee will remember that these were agreed. We agreed a definition of bullying and harassment. We recommended it to the council as Appendix 4, and we did that on the 4th of July 2019. So we've covered that one. Best practice 2, we should have provisions in the Code of Conduct requiring councillors to comply with any formal standards investigation. And we confirmed that in fact that's in our Code of Conduct already at paragraph 15. Best practice 3 is about reviewing the Code of Conduct each year. And this is in the work plan of the Standards Committee, and we reviewed it at the meeting on the 4th of July 2019. Best practice 4 was that the code should be readily accessible to both councillors and the public, and it was confirmed that it is on the council's website and available in council premises. One item that was an action for me to do was to redo the parish council audit, because it had been found that some of the parish councils did not have their Code of Conduct on their websites, and that is something I still need to do, but I will do that before I report back to the Cabinet Office. Best practice 5 was an updating of the gifts and hospitality register, which should be published in an accessible form. You'll remember we'd already looked at the gifts and hospitality policy and updated it. The register is on the council website, it's prominent, and it is updated on an annual basis when councillors are reminded before the budget council that they should update their interests. The 6th one is that we should have a clear and straightforward public interest test, and that is in the arrangements that are attached to the Code of Conduct. So we have that already. Best practice 7 is that the local authorities should have access to at least 2 independent persons. Well, we do actually have 1 independent person, and that's Tony Drew, but we do have access to all the other independent persons in our neighbouring boroughs, because we do share those. So we have actually got access to 2 independent persons. Best practice 8, an independent person should be consulted as to whether to undertake a formal investigation on allegation, should be given the option to review and comment on allegations, which the responsible officer is minded to dismiss as being without merit, vexatious or trivial. Well, that best practice is already in the arrangements. The independent person is actually asked to comment on all standards complaints, and I found that very helpful. Best practice 9 is about what we do with decision notices if there's been an allegation of misconduct following a formal investigation. These are already published on our website and so are available. Best practice 10, we should have straightforward and accessible guidance on its website about how to make a complaint under the Code of Conduct, the process and the estimated timescales for investigation and outcomes. That has actually been, that was in place, but it's actually been improved. We've actually got we've now got an online form for the submission of complaints, so that's been updated. Best practice 11, formal complaints about the conduct of a parish councillor towards the clerk should be made by the chair rather than the clerk, and parish councils have been reminded of this. Best practice 12, the monitoring officer's role should include providing advice, support and management of investigations and adjudications on alleged breaches to parish councils within the remit of the principal authority. And all the clerks are aware that I'm there to help and support them, and they do actually ask me for a lot of advice, which is good. And I also work very well with ALCA, which has been very helpful as well. Best practice 13, local authority should have procedures in place to address any conflicts of interest when undertaking a standards investigation. And as mentioned previously, we have informal agreements with our neighbouring councils, so Bristol, South Gloucestershire and North Somerset are willing to undertake investigations for me if I have a conflict of interest. Best practice 14, the council should report on separate bodies they set up or they own as part of their annual governance statement and give a full picture of their relationship with these bodies. Obviously, the council does have 2 separate council-owned companies. They are governed by a separate code of conduct and governance, and they are they have 2 reports a year, which go to the PDS and the audit committees, and then an annual report that goes to council. So again, that's being dealt with. And best practice 15, senior officers should meet regularly with political group leaders or groups to discuss standards issues. I attend the group leaders meetings, which have been taking place monthly. No, they were taking place weekly since COVID-19, and I have regularly discussed standards issues, most recently in May and again in June. Sorry, that was a bit of a gallop through, but was there anything that anyone wanted me to put, anything that they feel I should enlarge upon, or are they happy with that response that I'm going to give to the Cabinet Office?
Well, thank you, Maria. While colleagues may be muting themselves if appropriate, as you said, this is something that we have considered in the Standards Committee before, and this represents the response that we can give to the Cabinet Office. And I'm rather comforted that we've been through all of these items and have them all in place, apart from the audit of parish councils, which will be attended to quite shortly. I'm looking around to see if anyone wants to make any comment. I can't see that there is. In which case...
Axel, you've got Sally Davis and then Jess Davis want to speak.
Ah, right. Let's go with Sally first, as she's...
Thank you. It was on the chat function. It was just a question on best practice 3. When we say we annual review, which I'm sure we will, it just so happens it was July last year when we last looked at this, and we're now in July. I guess it'll be on a works programme that you're going to discuss at the end, before the end of this year.
So I put a little note for myself, but I didn't mention it. I'm sorry. The thing is, we've got this model code of conduct being proposed. So I think any annual review of our code of conduct should probably be postponed until we see where the LGA is going, because whatever changes we may then have to change it again if we're going to go for the model code of conduct.
Does that need to be reflected perhaps in what we've said then? That was just the only question.
Yeah, no, thank you. I have written it down on my notes of what I'm going to say to the Cabinet Office, but thank you. No, is everybody happy? Sorry, I should have said, is everybody happy with that proposal that we postpone the annual review because we are doing the model code of conduct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And unless there's anything else, Sally, Jess, I'm sorry I missed you earlier.
That's okay. It was just a quick point of clarification. Maria, thanks for going through where we're at with everything. I wanted to ask, do parish councils adopt the same code of conduct as BAMES, or do they have their own?
No, there's quite a lot of confusion at the moment, because when the government changed the standards regime, they said that everybody could choose their own model, their own code of conduct. So all the local authorities have different codes of conduct, and all the parishes have different codes of conduct, or can do. Some actually said, well, we'll have the same as the principal council, which is sensible, because everybody knows what they're doing, but they don't have to follow it. This is why the LGA has introduced the model code of conduct, so that there's actually consistency, and it's easier for councillors in some ways, because they actually know what the code is.
Could we include that as in the audit, kind of picking up, where people have, where parishes have their own code and where they followed the BAMES one?
I think the purpose of the audit was just really that whatever they've adopted, that they have it on their website.
Okay.
It will, if we ask them to move back to the, to follow the BAMES one, they will have to go through their council procedures to do that, to adopt it.
No, I didn't mean to make a request, but just to understand, how many of the parishes in BAMES have got, a different code of conduct might be interesting. Just to understand how many choose ours. But that's,
yes, I mean, I think that might be rather a lot of work, because, I mean, I can ask if they have just adopted the BAMES one. That should be easier. But obviously, as time goes on, people tend to modify their codes of conduct.
Okay. Thank you.
They may have started off with ours but just changed it.
Yes, and it may well be, Maria, that when the local government association model code is launched, that will then encourage parish councils and town councils to take on that code, and would at that stage certainly enable us to confirm one way or the other what codes they have adopted. Thank you. My attention having been drawn to the chat line, I can't see anybody else wanting to speak, and I can't see any nods or shake of heads. So we will come on to the consultation for the model code under agenda item number 8. So if colleagues are comfortable now that we send this response to the Cabinet Office as outlined by Maria, then we shall do so. Not seeing anybody objecting to that. May I now move on to agenda item number 5, which is items from the public to receive deputations or statements, petitions or questions, and there are none. Item number 6 is items from councillors and co-opted and added members relating to the general business of the committee, and here again there are none. So item number 7 is the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of September 2019, which I'm going to invite confirmation of them being a true record, subject to an amendment, which I'm going to ask Jack Latkovich to read out.
Thank you, Chairman. But before I say my say, I see that Councillor Davis asked this. Okay.
After you, Jack.
Okay. Yes, thank you. It was drawn to my attention that at the end of the minutes, a couple of sentences were missing. So I will read out what has been proposed, to be included in at the end of the minutes, the last paragraph. The scenarios on best practice in using social media had been circulated to members to consider. The meeting discussed the answers to the scenarios and the issues raised. Full stop. End of quote.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Before I ask councillors to vote on that, Sally, you wanted to make...
I was going to say I was quite happy to propose the minutes with that amendment added at the end.
Right. Thank you very much. And
I'll second that.
thank you for anticipating my next question, Duncan. So we have a proposal and seconded that the minutes subject to that amendment be accepted the true record of the meeting on the 19th of September 2019. Those in favour? I think that is, I think that's all of us. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to confirm if anybody object rather than those in favour, because it's very difficult to follow all these hands, but I can't see anybody objecting, so I can say that it's unanimous for minutes to be approved subject to that amendment.
I think we're all very comfortable with that. I can't see any nods, shakes of the head, or even anything on the chat line. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to item number 8, which is a report on the consultation on the modern code of conduct, which we talked about briefly a few moments ago. And I'm going to invite Maria as monitoring officer to introduce this subject.
Right, thank you, Chair. Right, so you've got the 2 documents in front of you. Just looking first at the model member code of conduct, there are just a couple of things that I thought I might just highlight to you. I think it's good, it's concise. On the third page, it deals with the situation where councillors, or it appears that someone is acting as a representative of the council, and trying to make it very clear that if you are acting as, or giving the impression that you're acting as a member of the council, then this code applies to you. And it says it's a very wide definition. It says all forms of member communication interaction, including written, verbal, non-verbal, electronic, and via social media. So it's actually trying to cover a wide range of situations. On page 4, there's a change to the code of conduct. You'll all recall in our code of conduct, we talk about respect and treating other councillors and the public and officers with respect. In this model code of conduct, they changed the word from respect to civility. And that is actually mentioned in the consultation as to whether this is the correct word, but they give a definition of what they expect, what civility is defined as. And I think very helpfully, they actually say in the last paragraph that in return, councillors have a right to expect courtesy from the public. And if members of the public are abusive, threatening, or intimidatory, you're entitled to close down any conversation in person or online and refer them to the council, any social media provider, or if necessary, the police. And I think this is very helpful for setting out to councillors, because I know sometimes councillors feel they can't turn off, and if they have got particularly vexatious residents, they can't say go away please. And I think that's helpful to have it in the code of conduct so that councillors understand that they have got to be civil, but the public are expected to be civil back in return.
Maria, may I interrupt, because I have got a miss from Duncan.
Just to speak later in the debate, so I'm happy to hear the monitoring officer give her presentation.
Thank you. So then quite a few things you would expect to be there: disrepute your position, use of council resources and facilities, interest, gifts and hospitality. And you'll note that they've actually reduced, well, they agree with us that it should be £25, the interest. So we'd already concluded that. So it's interesting to note that we were correct in doing so. Then they talk about breaches of the code of conduct. And they finally talk about the internal resolution procedure, which we call the arrangements for dealing with complaints. And that's interesting again, because they've put in an appeals process. Now, the arrangements for complaints had previously didn't have an appeals process in it. So obviously they are thinking that there should be an appeals process, and so we will have to change our arrangements if we want to bring this code in. They also say the procedure should be voted on by the council as a whole. And I think previously the arrangements have come to the standards committee and then we've recommended them to council. So that's still, the council will vote on them as a whole. It also sets out an escalating approach to sanctions. So sort of dealing with one, which is an informal discussion, up to a bar on attending committees for up to 2 months. And those seem very sensible to me. We tend to do a more pick and mix approach to sanctions if we feel they're needed. We've quite often done an apology and training as well, but I don't think that would stop us from doing this. So that's the code of conduct, and I guess probably it's good to stop there and see if there are any comments on the code, and then we can go through the consultation.
Duncan.
Yeah, is that okay with you, Chair?
Duncan. Yeah, Duncan.
Shall I come in there,
Yeah,
Chair?
please do.
Right, there's two sections I just want to refer to, which give me a little bit of cause for concern. It's not the what's written in bold type, but it's the supplementary text. Let me take the simplest or shortest one first. Item 7, disrepute. In the accompanying text, it says behaviour that is considered dishonest and or deceitful can bring your council into disrepute. I don't argue with that, but I just wonder if that's too narrow. It's possible to bring your council or role into disrepute in many ways. And I wonder if that's just too narrow to speak of dishonesty and deceit. Just anybody who reads Private Eye can see a whole range of situations which can bring a council or a role into disrepute. The other section I'd just like to talk about is number 4, impartiality of officers of the council. Now, I understand what it's attempting to say, but the accompanying text worries me slightly because I think the general public and ourselves feel that officers act like civil servants, that they provide advice, they make recommendations, but it's councillors who make decisions and then the officers implement them. But the way that's written, it's about, for example, it says you can question officers for their reasons for proposing to act in a particular way. But it then says you must not try and force them to act differently. Now, of course, ruling groups have been elected with a manifesto, and which has been democratically voted for. They have a mandate from the public to introduce certain things and act in certain ways. And so it would be reasonable then to force or encourage an officer to work in a particular way, so that that manifesto commitment, you know, if it's democratically voted for, is followed through. So it's just how it's written. It just it seems to suggest that it's officers that run the councils, but actually it's councillors that make the decisions, informed by officers, and officers can be expected to implement the decisions democratically made.
I think it's very difficult to put this in writing, but you cannot force an officer to act differently, because an officer is acting impartially. You may not like the advice that an officer has given you, yes, but they have to give you that advice. So, you know, I have been in several situations where I have had to tell a councillor that what they were proposing was not lawful or in the best interest of residents. The councillor has every right, or whoever it is, cabinet member, leader, to then go and make a decision differently, but they cannot force me to change my advice. And I think that's what they're trying to say. It's to maintain the impartiality. You may not agree with my advice, but you So I know what you're saying. And having
We've
been
been
one,
missing
yeah?
you, Maria, I'm afraid.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, your connection failed after you were talking about the impartiality.
Right. Okay. Sorry. So go back. So the councillor can ignore the advice of the officer, but cannot get them to change their advice if that's what they think. That's the best advice they can give. So having said that, though, if the councillor says, well, having heard your advice, I'm going to disregard it and I'm going to go and do something else, then the officer then has to carry that out to the best of their abilities.
Thank you. Can I come back? I'm very satisfied with what you've said there, Maria. It's just not quite how it's written in the text. It talks about you can question officers their reasons for proposing to act in a particular way, and it's just totally agree with you about not trying to change advice or recommendations, but it's the word act just worries me. I mean, just to give an illustration, something that would be maybe controversial but very important in a manifesto was low traffic neighbourhoods in Bath, and so it would be reasonable for, if that was democratically voted in the council or the cabinet, that officers followed through on that, and that they, there would be no attempt to act differently. That's all I'm trying to make clear.
Yeah. The examples I can give about possible councillor interference with officers acting is, for example, a licensing application that a councillor is considering, and that an officer is considering, and the officer has the delegation to be able to make that decision, and that maybe a councillor turns up with the taxi driver and tries to influence that officer.
Yeah.
It's those sort of situations that this is trying to stop. This is trying to safeguard. I mean, actually, Tony might have some other examples.
Yeah, I think the point is that it's councillors who set policy, and it's not officers who create policy or set policy. They follow the policy set by the council, but there are circumstances where sometimes officers perceive that councillors are applying unfair pressure by suggesting that they change a course of action, which, when you unpick it all, is not really a proper thing for them to do. So it's that situation that I think this paragraph is seeking to get at. But I take your point that the wording should be as unambiguous as possible.
Yes, I think it's. I think, Duncan, it is an interesting point, this, and this is a consultation we're going through. I'm conscious that Sally's waiting to say something, but the examples that Tony and Maria have given is presumably using, trying to use, let's just say, undue influence over an officer to act outside the parameters that they've been granted. To the benefit of a councillor or one of his or her electors, maybe. Is that what we had in mind with that particular paragraph?
It could be that it could be that the advice that's been given won't fit with what the councillor wants to happen. That can happen, in planning, that you could say, well, I'm sorry, that, under planning conditions, either that can happen or that can't. And the officer has to give impartial advice to the best of their knowledge, to their professional knowledge. And, it may be that it's not what the councillor wants to hear. But that doesn't refer to the acting bit, but that's about the,
Yeah.
this is what it's intended to be, so that councillors don't put pressure on officers to change their advice.
Yeah. Sally.
Well, I sit on both planning and licensing, and that's really where my thinking was coming to be, that it is very much policy that we set, but officers, when they have to go by the policy we have got at that moment in time. Unfortunately, they can't just change it. In particular case at the moment, very much where they're looking at more of the looking at green issues within planning. We cannot actually change climate emergency that we've adopted. We can't change all the policies that we would want to. So officers have to often give us advice in line with policy, which is perhaps not what the councillors who are there want to hear, but it's in line with policy. And so I think it's very much with planning and licensing in mind. I can see what that means exactly. As I say, I don't think, over the years' experience, officers haven't otherwise given advice and tried to change us or whatever it may be. It's just, I think it's policy which sometimes dictates what officers we expect from them.
In providing our response to this consultation, is that something, Maria, that we can highlight the very point that Duncan has made and the clarification from Sally?
Yes, I think so. When we get to the consultation, you'll see that there's a suggestion that they actually put case law in there and also some guidance and examples. And I think that would be very helpful to make sure that it's very clear about what they're actually intending. Yeah.
I'm looking over to the chat and I can't see any other comments. So that being so, I'll let you continue now, Maria.
Okay, so if we go on to the consultation, thank you. We'll see where we go. Right, so if we look at the consultation, I'm suggesting that we answer this on behalf of the council as a standards committee. I know there are some webinars planned for later in the month and in August, and the link's been sent to you, but if you want to, we'll put in a collective response now. But if having gone to the webinars, you want to change your mind or put in an individual response, then obviously you're able to do so. Okay. So first of all, the first question is about whether about how wide the code says about councillors acting as councillors. And do you support the proposal that councillors demonstrate the behaviours set out in the code when they are publicly acting, identifying as, and or giving the impression they're acting as a councillor, including when representing their council on official business and when using social media? So do you think that they should demonstrate the behaviours and the code should apply to them to a great extent, to a moderate extent, to a small extent, not at all, or don't know, prefer not to say? And I guess I hadn't really thought through how we would get these responses in a Zoom meeting. Do you want to, should we say, if I nod, do you think to a greater extent? Yeah, to a greater extent. The majority is to a greater extent. Sorry, it's not a great. We'll persist with this. We'll see. Okay, and anybody who doesn't think it should be to a great extent? No. Okay, right. If anyone wants to elaborate on the answer, could they send me their contributions? Yeah, that's question 1A. Yep. So question 2, is it sufficiently clear which parts of the model code are legal requirements, which are obligations and which are guidance? And I felt it didn't actually. I felt the answer was no. Is everybody happy with that? I didn't think it was clear. Yeah, and I thought it should be. 3, do you prefer the use of personal tense as used in the code, or would you prefer the passive tense? So it's the personal is I will, or passive tense councillors should. I think actually the I will.
Yeah.
Is everybody happy with I will? Or they should, councillors should?
I prefer councillors should, but it's not something I feel strongly about. So I'm happy to fall into line.
We can go with either. Which? I mean, yeah, we can put either.
Do you want to go for a quick vote on this one?
Is anybody particularly worried about?
Or what Maria suggested, either?
Or just should we put no preference?
I think it's fine as it's drafted.
That's I will.
There's quite a lot of passive tense as well, though. There's the I will is in bold, isn't it? And then
yeah. Okay, we'll, I'll say I will then, as it is drafted, as it's drafted. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then right, we've got this 12 specific obligations. So treating other councillors and members of the public with civility, and I guess it's between, do you support this to a great extent or to a moderate extent or to a small extent? So a bit about civility.
Yeah.
Great extent. Great extent. Is everybody happy with great extent? Yeah. Good. Then treating councillor employees, representatives, partner organisations, those volunteering with civility and respecting the role that they play. Great extent, yeah, great extent, yeah. Okay. I'm presuming I'm going to say great extent unless you say no. Not bullying or harassing any person. Great extent. Yeah. Not compromising or attempting to compromise the impartiality of anyone who works for or on behalf of the council. That doesn't mention act. That just says for or on behalf of. Yeah. Okay, great. Not disclosing information given to me in confidence or disclosing information which I believe is confidential nature. I guess great again. Yeah. Yeah. Not preventing anyone getting information that they're entitled to by law. Again, great. Good. Thank you. Not bringing my role or council into disrepute, but bearing in mind what you said about making that a wider definition. Yep. Not using or attempting to use my position improperly to advantage or disadvantage myself or anyone else. Yeah, great. Right. Oh, not misusing council resources. Yeah, a great or medium. Great. Great. Okay. Registering and declaring my interests. Great. Yeah. Not accepting significant gifts or hospitality from persons seeking to acquire, develop or do business with the council. I think great. Yeah.
I think we know where we are with that.
Yeah, I think that has to be great. Yes. And registering with the monitoring officer any gifts or hospitality of £25. Well, we've got that in our code already, so great. Right, if you'd like to propose additional or alternative obligations or would like to provide more comment on a specific obligation, please do so here. So I'm going to put in the bit about act, that it's unclear, and that in part the disrepute is too narrow and it should be more widely defined. Yep. Then it says, would you prefer to see the obligations as a long list followed by the guidance, or as set out in the original draft with the guidance after each obligation? And my view is, I think the specific followed by relevant guidance is good. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Then we've got, to what extent do you think the concept of acting with civility is sufficiently clear? I think that's a moderate extent. Do you think the definition, or yeah, you think it's okay, moderate extent?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go that. And they do say you could have an alternative phrase. I don't know if anybody wants to put one forward. It might be worthwhile if they re-mentioned respect in there somewhere, because people have understood the term respect, and we've used it in the code of conduct for a while. So I think it should be referenced in it, not maybe civility, but just saying treating people with respect. Yeah. Is everybody happy for me to put that in?
Yes, because in fact, you can be civil to somebody, but not really respect them. Respect goes beyond civility. And I think you're absolutely right.
Well, as in the expression, with due respect.
Then we've got, to what extent do you think the concept of bringing the council into disrepute is sufficiently clear? And I'm going to say to a small extent, because I'm going to put the comment in about that, yeah, it should be what, it should be broader. And so that says with all alternative phrase, I'll put some wording in there. And we have got some time, so what I will do is I'll circulate this. I can put the responses in and we can get them agreed. Yes, I'll circulate them, make sure everyone's happy.
And my, Maria, my online consultation for this is at the end of this month, which is within the period for providing responses. And I imagine if colleagues are also signing up for that online, it may be that some other things have been prompted, which might be of benefit to us as a standards committee.
So, when is it? It's coming in the, so I've got the date here somewhere.
Well, the one I've signed up for is the 29th of July.
That's right, yes. The actual consultation finishes on the 17th of August.
Mm-hmm.
So we have got till the 17th of August to do this. So actually, if I draft up what these responses now, and then we can have a sort of, once people have gone on the webinars, we could add stuff in if we need to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So then we've got the definition of bullying and harassment used in the code in the local government context, and that seems to be very similar to what we put in our own code when we agreed. So everybody happy to a greater extent?
Yep.
Good. Any other definitions that we feel should be in there? Not at the moment. Okay. Is there sufficient reference to the use of social media? It's mentioned. I think, yeah, I mean, it is mentioned, so I think I'll say yes, but if anyone wants to say no, then yeah. And should social media be covered in a separate code or integrated into the overall code of conduct? My view, it probably should be in the same code.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's integrated. Into the code. Yeah. Okay. And it does say any comments or suggestions in relation to how the use of social media is covered in the code. No. Okay. No comments.
It's a continuing to develop area, isn't it? Social media, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think if you say it's covered by the code, then you can just use the general principles to decide how people are behaving in social media. Yeah, yeah, I think that's good move. So then you're talking about registrations and declaration of interests. To what extent do you support the code going beyond the current requirement to declare the interests of the councillor and their partner? And my feeling is that I think it should go beyond the current requirement, because you could have a disclosable pecuniary interest if your daughter or son or relative is actually got a planning application, but you don't have to disclose it as a disclosable interest because it's not that of you, yourself and your partner. So you could actually sit on a planning committee. You shouldn't do because of bias. But you don't, under the code, you don't actually have to declare it. Yep. So I think this should go beyond, and so I would say to a greater extent. Are you happy with that? Or,
we have had examples of that sort.
We have
brought before the committee in the past. For example, a lady put in for a planning application. It was not declared that he was the wife of a councillor's son.
Yeah.
And I did it that way so that it wouldn't be
Yeah.
Nobody would comment on it.
Yeah, I think I remember the case.
Yeah. Kathy wanted to speak, Chair.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you. I just think it starts to become incredibly difficult where you draw the line as to, especially these days where there are so many relatives, stepchildren, and a variety that as it is now, at least it's very clear. It's just sort of close relatives. It is opening sort of a can of worms. Where does it stop? So that's my view on it.
I suppose the argument against that is if it is a can of worms, then we need to ensure that people know they have an obligation. And I think we might all expect that these days, when quite rightly members of the public are looking at what councils and others do, that it's right that as much be disclosed as possible to avoid any accusations of impropriety. Let's put it that way. Michelle, you wanted to make a point.
Yes, just I agree with that. I think that we need to be very clear that it's we're not talking nieces and nephews. Perhaps we're talking brothers, sisters, children, stepchildren, people who are very, very closely related. Because I come from a big family, but I don't know what my third uncle from my father's side is going to do with his planning application. But I think we need to be very clear that it's close family members, not just partners as well.
I suppose there are some issues if, sorry Maria, I suppose there are some issues if it's your third uncle on your father's side and you're involved in an application of that, I mean there may be relatives you don't know anything about, but if it's come to your attention, it would be right, wouldn't it, to declare that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with disclosable pecuniary interests is that they're not dealt with as standards complaints. If the interest is not registered, it goes to the police because it's a criminal offence. And I think that is the problem. Actually, arguing against myself in this actually, but I think I would like to put a comment in there, something about saying that these should be decriminalised, because it's such a it's too specific, but councillors need to know they need to declare a wider variety of interest, because the whole idea is about transparency, and this doesn't help with the transparency argument. Are you happy for me to put that sort of a comment on that it should be wider, but it shouldn't be, the criminal penalty shouldn't apply automatically to the wider family?
Yeah.
There's a chap from June Player would like to speak.
Hello, June.
I'm all for transparency. Then nobody, and then there's no doubt, there's no question, nothing.
Yes, I think it would be very helpful if you would make those comments, Maria. Of course, inadvertent failure to disclose is where your criminal penalties come into play. The Supreme Court has recently given a judgment endorsed by the Court of Appeal on the general subject of dishonesty, and in that they did not define dishonesty, because they said effectively everybody has an idea of what it is, and that's what we're trying to get at here, isn't it?
Yes, and obviously we are aware of, as well, of the apparent bias shown by Robert Jenrick, so which is brought in the news at the moment. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic, interest at the moment. So question 12, is should the requirement to declare interest be in the main body of the code or the appendix where the draft model code currently references it? And my feeling that actually interests are really important, and that is the area where we get the most complaints, and it should be in the main body, but I'm happy to take what you want to do. Main body, yes.
It's a central matter, I think.
Yes, it's only in an appendix because the government didn't do the legislation all at the same time. They did that as an they did the interest. Sorry, that is what happened. They did the interest as an afterthought. So yes, so I think it should be the main body. So then, question 13. To what extent do you support the inclusion of these additional categories for registration? So any organisation, association, society or party of which you are a member or in a position of general control or management, or which you two are appointed or nominated by the council. So this was covered before, I think, in the previous code of conduct, because school governors would be included and things like that, where councillors were included. So do you think it should be to a greater extent or to a moderate extent? Or to a small extent, not at all?
You just run that through again, Maria.
Yeah, they're asking.
I will just say I'm very conscious that we've been going for nearly an hour and in front of a Zoom, and it may be that colleagues need a break, but
yeah. I was going to say, should we take that one, if you want to give me your responses to that one, and I'll take the majority of that not by on chat, but if you send them to me after this meeting, when I send the document out, I'll take a collation, because there's quite a few on that one. But if I whiz through, then there's a bit about do you support the proposed requirement that councillors do not accept significant gifts? And hopefully I can say to a great extent, because we have already spoken about gifts and hospitalities, and we said no, they shouldn't accept significant gifts. So I can say to a greater extent. Hopefully that's an agreement. And then we've got £25 as the threshold. Well, we agree that because we've already put that in our own code. And then the LGA will be producing accompanying guidance to the code. Which of the following guidance would you find most useful? Regularly updated examples of case law, explanatory guidance on the code, case studies and examples of good practice, supplementary guidance that focuses on specific areas, for example, social media, or improvement support materials such as training and e-learning packages. I mean, you can, yes, you've got to rank them 1 to 5. So again, if I send that round, and if people can give me their responses, I'll just take the majority, yeah? And then if you've got any suggestions for any other accompanying guidance or any other further comments, I can pass those all on.
Yeah.
And that's the end. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Maria. I can't see any comments on the chat line. We haven't finished the agenda. We're not very far away. I don't think there's very much more to go, but in fairness and thinking about people being on Zooms for a long time, I did 10 hours at a stretch yesterday. If colleagues would like to have a break, or shall we just continue through? Well, June. But I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself, June. Right.
Sorry, I was looking in the wrong place. 2 things. Question 11 on the transparency one, Maria. What was the outcome on that one, please? I realised I didn't realise. What was the decision?
We said we
Question 11.
Yeah, to a greater extent, but with the caveat about the criminalisation, but just saying that the principle should be transparency, and that we should focus on it could be other relatives if they know the application.
Okay, right. So transparency was put in. I didn't catch that. And yes, I'm all right. I'm all for just a few minutes walking about, please.
Right. So, do you want to have a little break now, or can? Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I just confirm that you want
Yes.
to?
Hello, hello, Jack. Sorry, you're just trying to see where you are on my screen.
Can I just confirm that you want to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think
Maybe-
so.
Yes.
May we do that?
Okay, we are back at 5:05. Okay.
Can I ask you all to switch your videos off and then switch them back on when you come back on, please?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we are ready to reconvene the meeting.
Excellent, thank you. I was just looking to see that that everyone has returned, and I'm afraid on the Zoom the pack has been shuffled and you're all in different places now. Good, thank you very much, and thank you for the prompt to have a break. We will do more on the consultation in due course, particularly after we've had our webinar, and Maria will send round information to us and we can do the various bits of ranking and any other suggestions that come to mind at that stage. So that being so, unless there is anything else to be said on agenda item number 8, I can't see any suggestions we should. Then let's note that that's what we're going to do and move on to agenda item number 9, report on assessment of complaints, which has been circulated, and Maria is going to introduce that item as well.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I've got a little bit of an update on the complaints just recently. Complaint 0120 BPC, which is actually being assessed by an independent monitoring officer because there was a conflict of interests. That assessment has taken place. It took place on the 1st of July 2020, and the recommendation is that there should be mediation with regard to that parish council. So that's being set up at the moment. And then with regards to second one of 2020, RTC, that has been assessed. The initial assessment has been done. That was done on the 2nd of July 2020, and that matter is going to go for investigation. So there will, from the seriousness of that complaint, it's likely that it will come back to Standards Committee. So I do propose that in September I was going to do some training about hearings, and I suggest we still do that. That training. So we have only 2 standards complaints outstanding at the moment. For completeness, I should mention that 320 RTC, which was adjudicated on the 8th of June 2020, the member of the public was unhappy and went to the local government ombudsman with their complaint, which they have a right to do. The local government ombudsman has already come back to us, having looked at the decision notices and all the paperwork, and has said he is not going to investigate this. So, okay. That's all I have to report. Unless any, and I'll take any questions on that assessment tracker.
If there are any, and I can't see any on the chat.
I mean, obviously, just to say, RTC does stand for one of our town councils, and it does look as though it's not the same councillor, it's actually 3 different councillors, but I think there isn't a problem. It just happens to be the one that will go for investigation obviously is serious, but the other 2 are more minor. I don't think there is a problem with that town council. It's just unfortunate that they seem to have had 3 complaints in this year so far.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Right. There being no comments that I can see on the chat line, so to speak, then let's just note that. And as you say, training in September, we were due to have training earlier, and training in September will be quite timely, bearing in mind the particular complaint that you mentioned that's going forward for investigation. So item number 10 is the work plan for Standards Committee. Maria, would you care to give us a verbal update?
Sorry, just my computer's just gone down. I think the only thing that was on the work plan was obviously the annual review of the Code of Conduct.
Yeah.
But in fact, we have we have certainly considered a Code of Conduct, and we considered the model one, and as we've agreed, that will be put off for the review until we find out what's happening with the model Code of Conduct. There should also be, I think we should have had, we usually about this time we do the annual report of the Standards Committee.
Mhm.
So we can work on that between now and September to have that ready. Is there anything else on that work plan that I've missed?
No, just thank you for reminding me about some homework I need to do and a bit of prep over the summer in doing the annual report with you. I can't see any other comments. In which case, with the hope that we can do training in September, and our next Standards Committee meeting is due to be the 17th of September 2020, it leaves me to thank you all very much for your attendance this afternoon. It's been a fascinating experience doing things on live and on YouTube, and trying to multitask with chat at the side of the screen as well. But it's been a delight being able to see all your faces, particularly when there have been rather nice smiles on there as well. So may I thank you very much for this afternoon and for this meeting. Look forward to the 17th of September. Who knows and how we're going to meet, but I'm looking forward to it. And it's now my pleasure to close the meeting formally. Thank you very much.
Thank you.